Hello, friends. We are really happy today to have another one of our leaders in the community and in Wisconsin, as well as what she's doing nationwide. So if there are any league announcements, this is a time to slide it in, and then I'll introduce Ann Terrell. So are there any other announcements coming from league members? Okay, good. I'm ready for you, Lorna.
I just want to ask and remind people to sign up for the program planning meeting on Thursday. It is in your recent update, or if anybody didn't get it, I could send it to them. This is where we decide what matters to the league in terms of advocacy issues. So this is where we determine what we're going to do for 22-23 starting in July. So if you think we're not doing things in an area that you would like, we can't do them if you don't come and tell us what to do and you want to get involved. There's your volunteering again, but you know, if you want to make change, you got to show up. So, just, you need to register, go in the most recent update and you can register if you can't attend, but you'd like to let us know what's important to you. There's also a survey in there that you can fill out. And also you could leave me your email if you wanted any more information. So I hope people, right now we've got a fairly decent sign up. So I'm encouraged by that and I hope more people do. Thank you.
If you're able to put anything into the chat so we can track it down, I don't want to distract you from.
Yeah, I can maybe copy that thing. Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm eating lunch, so I'm going off screen.
People sometimes say to me, I can only see from the nose up, and it's like, because I'm eating.
Me too, Pat. I'm eating right now.
So I want to welcome everybody, and I want to tell you about my friend Ann Terrell. So Ann is recognized as one of the most influential African Americans in Wisconsin, a respected trainer in DEI. She authored the book Graceful Leadership in Early Childhood Education, and knowing Ann, I can promise you she is graceful. And then she also helps with all the issues related to early childhood. So Ann graduated from MATC, and then she went on to further her education, and she ran our child care center for quite a few years. She ran her own child care center as a businesswoman, that we are accepting that term, Ann. And I found out by swimming in the pool yesterday, I met a friend of Ann's. And when she heard that I had taught at MATC, she said, do you know Ann Terrell? I said, I love Ann Terrell. And she says, yeah, she and I knew each other through the Cothi dancers. I said,
oh, wow.
Ann is a dancer? And she says, yeah. And Ann and I have been chatting. She started as a teenager. So, Ann, one of the questions we often ask people is, can you figure out what your movement birthday is? When do you feel you joined the movement for justice?
Oh, thank you for that. I believe it was in that time when I was this young teenager, and around the corner from my house, when we moved to Milwaukee, we settled in 53206 on 17th and Locust, and around the corner was Hepatha Lutheran Church, and Hepatha at that time ran a youth program, and so James Mosley and some other colleagues were the adults that ran that program, and I was hired as a youth counselor. That was my first job, working with children, but I also learned so much. That was during my formative years. That was in the late 60s, early 70s, and that's when I joined Cothi Dance Company. But the mentoring that I received by the adults that were running that program, that's when the learning and the history that built upon what my family had, shared with me about growing up in Kentucky. But that was my foundation.
That's sweet.
Pat, excuse me. I'm going to mute myself because I'm having a new furnace put in.
Sure.
And I know you all can hear that noise. So when I want to talk, I'll turn it back on.
I'll watch for you, Barbara. Thanks. Okay. So Ann, I'm going to let you just take it away.
Okay.
I know you know how to present.
Let's see. What do you all see?
Yep, we see your screen. Woohoo!
Okay. All right, great. So then let me pull up the one that I need to see. All right, so thank you all again for making time during the lunch hour. When Pat asked me if I was interested or, would be willing to speak today, when Pat asked, I said yes. Pat was one of those people that was foundational in my early childhood career. And so she asked and I said yes. I also would share with you all that this is not the first time that I've spoken to the League of Women Voters in Milwaukee. This was probably about 15 years ago, maybe. And I spoke, it was in person, and I spoke on this same subject, early childhood education. I believe it was when we were trying to pass some local or statewide legislation around early childhood. So I'm happy to be back and happy to be with you all today. So Pat asked me to talk a little bit about a couple of subjects. So I thought I would start with how this pandemic is impacting early childhood educators. What is interesting is that this COVID pandemic has brought to light the essentialness of early childhood education, right? That if the child care community does not work, then other essential workers cannot work, right? And so here are just some headlines or some quotes from early childhood providers that during this season of pandemic. Despite the key role that childcare providers are playing in support of other essential industries during the COVID-19 crisis, the childcare system as a whole is at risk of collapse due to the economic impact. As the CEO of 2 early learning centers, I am seeing a paradox play out in real time. My business has been labeled essential, but the way we've been treated by the state makes me feel like we're anything but. And then this one, finally, essential, not expendable, childcare workers on the front lines of COVID-19. And so that's just to give you a sampling of how this pandemic has affected and impacted early childhood. And we see those signs, right, outside of hospitals and other medical institutions that heroes work here. Well, I like the fact that this child care provider took it upon herself to put in her window, well, heroes work here as well. And so I snapped this, this picture to share with you because she's standing firm in her power and saying, well, heroes work here too. And she's reminding people that heroes also work here. However, what is not getting as much attention during this pandemic is that these childcare providers, teachers, family childcare providers, are mostly Black and brown women, are in one of the most underpaid workforces, typically paid less than parking lot attendants and zookeepers, so underpaid that they qualify for and receive public assistance. There is still a history of childcare in America that influences this situation. I love this symbol. It's the African or Ghanaian symbol of Sankofa. It means to look back in order to move forward. And that's what I'd like to do right now, set some context for this situation that we find ourselves in. Many people, when talking about childcare, think back to World War II when childcare centers were opened so that women could go to work in factories. And here we have 2 examples of that. However, childcare has a history in enslavement. I believe that we've all seen these kind of images, these photos of enslaved Black women caring for their owners' children in lieu of caring for and raising their own children. Southern whites would not allow enslaved people to own property or exercise their civil rights. But interestingly enough, they often entrusted them with the raising of their own precious children. There were many a slaved mammy or auntie that served as a surrogate mother. This work was free labor, and that pay hasn't progressed much since then. So even within this underpaid field, there is disparity because African-American early childhood teachers earn 84 cents for every $1 earned by white teachers. And you can see that that is almost $4,500 per year, which could cover 3 months of rent or 5 months of childcare, 7 months of groceries, 15 months of student loan payments, 3 years of health insurance, or 4 years of transportation costs. However, there is good news on the horizon. And that is what I've been talking about a lot lately, and that is President Biden's Build Back Better legislation. Build Back Better prioritizes a historic $400 billion investment in early childhood education that would lower costs for families and raise the wages of early childhood educators. Build Back Better, again, sees childcare and early childhood education not just as a workforce issue, but also as an education and child development issue. You know, even here in Wisconsin, the child care department used to be under the Department of Workforce Development, and we worked really hard to get it out of there so that it wasn't seen entirely as a workforce issue. We know, those of us in the field know, that early childhood education is just that. It is an educational issue as well, because learning begins at birth, and people doing this work often are caring for those children up to 8 to 10 hours a day and providing that educational service. And so here in the Build Back Better plan, this is historic. Child care and preschool are second only to the energy and the environmental sums that are put into the Build Back Better. You can see that those clean energy and climate investments are proposed at $555 billion, while child care is proposed at $400 billion. Never before has anyone, well, let's see, 50 years ago, there was a proposal that almost passed, and it did pass. It passed both houses, and it got to President Nixon's desk, and he vetoed it because someone said to him, if women go back to work, and if we pass this, it'll break up the family. It's communist, you know. So anyway, it didn't pass then, but it's been 50 years. And I will say to you that we can't wait another 50 years for this kind of legislation. Now, I also know that that Manchin has indicated that he will not vote for this legislation. But what we've heard last week is that he's willing to come back to the table and consider it. And the only two areas that he is interested in having a conversation about are the child care and preschool and the clean energy investments. And so we are very hopeful that this is this information that we received is actual, because we would like to see this pass. And again, as I said before, we can't wait another 50 years for this kind of investment. We see early childhood education as a public good. And that's what we're hoping that the public sees it as a public good. Just like K through 12 education, early childhood education should be seen as a public good. So Build Back Better, again, what it prioritizes is increased wages for early childhood educators to drive supply and quality, increased options and decreased costs for families to drive affordability and accessibility, and increased support for quality and the early childhood workforce to drive economic return on investment. However, what I will say to you is, even if it passes at the federal level, this legislation, states have the option to opt in. And we know that we are here in Wisconsin, where Wisconsin has a history of not accepting or not buying into federal dollars that come into the state. So even if it passes on the federal level, we have work to do here at the state level to indicate to our elected officials that these funds are needed and that they are worthwhile and they would make a huge difference in the state. So I say to my colleagues, you know, your voice has power. And I encourage them and I encourage you to pay attention to what's happening to that legislation at the federal level. And if, you know, I'll say to you what I say to them, when it passes, not if it passes, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed here, that we have to then pay attention to what happens at the state level. And I say to the folks that I work with in early childhood, let the passion for your people lead you. You use your voice and take your place, my sister. Our children need you. And so I say, what's next for us? What's next for early childhood education? And this from Jack Shonoff, who is the director of the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, that the early childhood field is at a critical inflection point in a changing world. The opportunity to align new science and the lived experiences of families and decision makers across a diversity of sectors, cultures, and political values offers a powerful pathway forward. The need for shared leadership along the path is urgent right now. So, you know, we hear people saying, well, I can't wait till it gets back to normal. I can't wait till things return to normal. Well, I say that back to normal wasn't working for us in the early childhood field. We were underpaid and undervalued. And so what I say is, may we grow back not to what was, but instead towards what we can become. And I thank you today for your time and attention, and I am available. I understand from Pat that there's also the opportunity for some question and answers and dialogue. So I am open for that. Pat, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, Ann, first of all, I have to say that was just beautiful. Every slide
Yes.
put together was very creative and very effective. And it just reminds me of the passion and the creativity that I've observed in you for many years. And so I thank you again for that. So let's open it up, friends. I know this is an issue that matters, and I am very grateful that you have the hopeful side that Build Back Better might come through for us, or, you know, and we are the people who advocate, so tied in with what we were originally saying.
If what we hear is true and Manchin really is willing to come back to the table, that's what we're hopeful for right now. That's what we heard not last week, but the week before, that from his aides, that he could be considering coming back to the table. And the two issues that he's willing to consider are the early childhood and the environment.
That comes from a love of people. So Barbara has her hand up. Barbara Rasmussen.
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering if you're confident in the numbers there, the money coming for early childhood, if you're confident it will be equitably available to, say, smaller child care centers. I had been a board member of Next Door Foundation one time.
Mm-hmm.
You think it's going to be an equitable distribution?
Yeah, there's specific language within that legislation that says that family child care, you know, the small ones, the small businesses, women and some men that operate out of their homes, that it is equally distributed, and that the funds for both the education and for the education of the teachers and the staff, and the education of the students are not equally distributed, but it's distributed across the board. That it's not just for center-based, it's not just for preschool teachers in public school settings, that it is across the board for people that work with children from birth through age 5.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
So I know we have
And
people on the, go ahead.
May I go?
Yeah.
And I love that presentation. It was very succinct and informative. Now, this whole thing about, you know, what's happening and that low
the low pay that Black and brown women end up getting in childcare. It's like, do you see that changing now that the pandemic has brought more attention to it?
Good question. And unfortunately, no, not unless there are funds that are funneled through like this legislation to those programs. So this legislation, so you may not know, but child care centers are reimbursed based on attendance. First of all, they don't charge the actual cost. You know, so it's being subsidized on the backs of the child care workers. That's one thing, because they aren't reimbursed based on their costs, but they are also reimbursed based on attendance, not on seats. So if I'm running a child care program and Barbara's enrolled and Barbara only comes 3 of the 5 days, I'm only paid for 3 days, even though all my overhead is still there. All of my costs, I don't send the teacher home for those 2 days. So that's the fundamental piece that we have to also address, that childcare should be seen as a public good, just like the K through 12 system. We have to change people's mind. You know, it's considered women's work. And so it's easy and anybody should be able to do it, and it should be free or at no cost. And that's the mindset that we have to change based on what we know about brain development in those early years, that is critical, that it's not work that just anybody can do. You have to have educated folks that understand child development doing this work. And so there's a lot of moving pieces to that. But to answer your question, Barbara, until people understand that, and I think that Build Back Better has the potential to do that, because there are funds in there for increased education, for people working in the field to attend colleges like MATC, to get their degrees, to get 1-year certificates, get some college. But then to go along with that, there are levels to that with increased pay, so that they're no longer making $9 or $10 an hour.
Wow.
You know, a lot of our field are leaving. Unfortunately, we hear stories every day about them leaving to go to work in the big box stores because they don't have to do lesson plans. They don't have to talk to parents. They can go to Walmart and make more money and have less responsibilities than they do working in early childhood, unfortunately.
Wow.
I see Lorna's hand up.
I really appreciate your optimism, Ann, but I think there's so many things that make you concerned. You know, first of all, how do you convince Joe Manchin? And, you know, why is he so dug in a state that's one of the poorest states in the country? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Secondly, you just mentioned that we have to get it through our legislature.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a big giant boulder in the way. And, you know, and anything that smacks of what they want to call socialism.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if we want to subsidize, we no longer think of public education as socialism, but, you know, I'm sure that was thought that in the past as well. So, you know, hopefully what they've seen, and women still are not back in the job market because of childcare issues and concerns for their children's health. And that will hurt the economy. So they only notice if it hits it somewhere in the wall, you know, in the wallet. But you know, maybe that would be going for, you know, this program in terms of getting it passed in our state. But that is a huge problem to get passed. So my question would be, what can we do? What can league members do to help to advocate for these changes? How do you see that working?
Thank you. And you're right. First, we have to get it passed at the federal level. And that's why we are so hopeful. I'm currently the president of the National Association for the Education of Young Children. It's the largest early childhood association in the country, internationally, as a matter of fact.
Right?
We've got over 60,000 members, and we have affiliates in almost all states. And so we are working specifically with the affiliates and the early childhood people in Mansion's area in his state. And we've released that some data that just shows that those folks are worse off than almost anybody else. And so it was after that release of that data that we heard that he might be willing to come back to the table.
Look like it did. Okay, hold
And so that's the first thing. If we can get it, if he really is ready to come back to the table and it passes at the federal level, then what we have to do is advocate at the state level and let our elected officials know at the state level that we do want those funds, that, that we want them to accept that federal funding. We're already starting to have some conversations at the state level with our Department of Early Childhood. Those folks are very open to hearing our concerns and to listening to us, to to pass what we believe is new rules and regulations around early childhood. So if we can get it passed at the federal level, at the state level, what we have to do is really advocate for and talk to our elected officials, our state elected officials, so that those funds do come into our state.
Is there a way that we can put our voices to that?
Yes, I will forward information to Pat for her to share, so that you all can stay on top of it. You might hear, if you're local, if it does pass federally, you probably will hear me do a Yahoo.
Because that is a position the league the league can act only on positions that it says it has. And
Okay.
that is already a position that the league has. I have to look it up, but I know there's something there about quality childcare or something like that. So we don't have to think about, oh, can we support this or can't we support this? So I would suggest if you could do that with Pat and she could send it to me, that we could try to put out to our members to advocate for this. Sometimes it's a good idea. Something easy to do is to sort of draft some kind of a statement that they can then send to all of their legislators. And if we could do that statewide, that would even, obviously have more impact than just here in Milwaukee. So
there's additionally the opportunity to sign on to a letter that's advocating for the federal legislation to pass, and I'll forward that to you, Pat. I know I signed on to it the other day, and so I will definitely get you all that information. Thank you for the support and the interest.
If you could also send Pat your slides, we could pull a little bit of your data off and use that to influence our members to sign up for that.
Oh, that would
All right, will do.
great. Plus, we're recording this, so we can share that with our friends too, to get to see who couldn't come today. So Charlene Moore, good to see you and good to see your hand is up.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for your presentation. The question that I have is, do you know of other advocacy groups that have embedded this into their advocacy or taking the lead on this particular issue?
Yeah, I mostly stay up on what our organization is doing, but I do know nationally, all of the early childhood national organizations have signed on to this. There's at least 15 national early childhood organizations. We happen to be the largest, but there are 15 national early childhood organizations that have signed on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I see some other familiar faces, many of them who have a voice. Feel free to unmute and comment on the importance of standing up for children in every way we can possibly advocate for them.
You know, Pat, there's some additional, I'm making a list of everything I want to send you.
Sure.
There's these federal research projects that have followed children in quality early childhood settings. They followed those kids now for 40 years. They followed them first to high school. Then there was another study when they turned 27, and now they've turned 40 years old. And what they have found is that compared to their other colleagues or their peers, that the children from the same neighborhood, this poor neighborhood in Ypsilanti, Michigan, it's called the High Scope Study.
Right.
After 40 years, those children were more likely to go on to high school and graduate. They were more likely to go to college. They were less likely to have contact with the criminal justice system, less likely to become teen, parents.
Mhm.
And so we know the savings in just, the social systems that those kids don't take advantage of, are savings and investments that any community should be interested in, right? It just makes so much sense. And so I can send you that the results of that 40-year study as well. Every time one of the updated studies came out, I got excited. So when the recent study showed that not only are those children doing well as adults, but now they're parents, and the outcomes on their children are phenomenal as well. And so when you talk about breaking the cycles of poverty, so anyway, I'll be quiet.
I want to, oh, good. Helen, jump in, and then Ann, if I forget to say this, and then Jan, so I see Helen and Janet have their hand up. And if I forget to mention it, and you could be noodling that question too about the federal bank survey that.
Federal Reserve,
The Federal
the
Reserve,
Federal Reserve.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we'll get back to that one, but let's take Helen and then Janet.
Well, because it tied to the other comments that I made. The Federal Reserve found that for every $1 invested in high quality early childhood, a community realizes $7 to $16 in savings, because of those children giving back in the form of taxes, this less contact with the criminal justice system, less teenage pregnancy. So for every dollar invested in high quality early childhood education, a community realizes $7 to $16 in return.
And there's no other investment that has that return. No other investment, period. Helen.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for the presentation and this time together. So somebody said at some point like that we have K through 12 education is part of our system, but we don't have anything for younger kids. And so the part of me thought, well, so how could that kind of thing happen? But then I'm also, because you're mentioning community, what's going on in Milwaukee or Milwaukee County? What could we do, or what? Well, I don't even actually know what's going on here, so I can't, but I'm thinking, how can we put our focus on Milwaukee?
There's a lot of interest in early childhood. And it's interesting that it's happening during this pandemic. But what I'm seeing is that this public-private industries coming together. The Greater Milwaukee Foundation, the Medical College of Wisconsin, and Royal Capital are investing, and the old Gimbel Schuster's building on King Drive, and they are renovating that building. And what they're doing on the first floor of that building will be a high quality early childhood program, primarily focusing on high quality infant toddler care, because the studies show that that's what's needed here in Milwaukee. that infant toddler care, I would say children birth through at least 3 years of age is really what's lacking. And so while that will be their focus, this program will serve children 6 weeks to 8 years of age, I believe. And so that's one thing. But then we've got our local affiliate. WICA is the local affiliate of our national organization. They've got a project in the 53206 to improve the quality of care by investing in education and funds in some childcare programs in specific to that zip code. So it's very interesting right now. What I talked to the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, to their board of directors, and what I'm seeing is this interest and investment in early childhood education. And what my thing was, and I think that this had an impact, is if you can imagine that the families in those communities only had high quality early childhood education to choose from, if that was their only option, what a difference that would make. So what I'm seeing is some public-private interests coming together, and listening to those Federal Reserve folks and listening to the folks from Harvard University saying, this is the investment that a community can make if it wants to turn it around. We have lessons learned from Boston, the Boston Public Schools partnering with the child care centers in their community, improving the services that they provide, and then partnering with them so that children have somewhere to go. We've seen in San Antonio, Texas, where in that community, this investment in high quality early childhood. So there are things happening around the country, but also happening right here in our community as well.
Janet, can you unmute? Can you unmute?
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information. I have always believed that early education is important, and you did a fine job of getting all these different organizations involved. And where you mentioned on 3rd Street there on Martin Luther King Drive, where they set up a new educational program. It's so great because then just around the corner is a library, a big library. And if they could hook that up and have library days, and you get those parents that bring those little kids there, there's nothing like a story that will keep them going. I know I used to work with, near the end of my profession, with women in prison. And I would always ask them what they were doing with their children. And they hardly ever did any reading. So I got a whole bunch of books from where I was teaching, and gave them each a big bag of books. And I said, now come on, let's see what we can do together that you can go back and share with your children. So I'm so happy to hear all the contacts you have in the Milwaukee area, because it's an important time in life to learn when you are young, because so many good statistics say you will survive, you will share, you will get yourself involved in what's important in life. So thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you. And I agree with you. Early literacy is key. It is so key. And when we were doing an earlier survey some years ago, and there was a home visiting program, and they would visit the homes of some of our lower income citizens, and they would come back and say things like, there's not a newspaper or a magazine, or there's nothing in the home to read, not even those free community newspapers. And so you're right about that. We, I think, besides working with the children, have to work with the parents as well, because that intergenerational approach works really very well. Parents realize that they are their child's first teacher. and they start to read and start to count. And, there's this wonderful example that I like to share about, a parent in parents in the grocery store, and they happen to be in the fresh produce aisle, and the child is in the seat and points to an eggplant. And the one parent says, I don't know what that is. We don't eat that. Let's keep going. And the other parent says, that's called an eggplant. And look at it. It's purple and it's shiny. And let's buy a small one and take it home and see what it's like to. So which child is going to have those literacy skills, right? And it doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much. It's those everyday conversations that we have with those young people. So thank you, Janet. I totally agree with you. Early literacy is so important, so important.
We used to, where are you? What I was gonna say, we probably can get some more money from the president, because his wife is a teacher. And
Right.
he's, it's like, we just need to keep asking him, and she will say, yes, honey, that's where you gotta put some more money, Mr. Biden, because he's so good.
I love it.
it.
Barbara Tolles, would I be, somebody has their hand up from the league, and I'm not sure if that was Lorna. No. Hi, Peggy. So this is Peggy Creer. She is our trusted and beloved president of the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County.
Thank you.
Peggy, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I joined about 10 minutes late. I was stuck on a phone call. But I kind of look at this issue as I do the issue of universal health care. And in my mind, I'm thinking, who's against this? Who loves insurance companies? This is a money saver, common sense. And so the issue of early childhood education, I see, of course, benefits businesses who are waiting for people to get back to work, unions, educators for all the kids who get a nice head start, parents, healthcare. Where is the roadblock? Who is against this? Where is that coming from?
It's interesting that you mentioned business, because that traditionally has been the roadblock. They haven't seen or realized. Now, what's interesting is that they've seen it when how do I put this? When it is a matter for their own family, right? It's very interesting because at the headquarters of Nike, they have this beautiful, high quality early childhood education center, but for their executives, right? But they don't have it in the factory for those workers. So for the business community has traditionally been those that they don't see it, how it benefits them. But when they do, when they get it, they get it. And so, understanding for them that when you have childcare as a benefit, just like healthcare and all those other that packages that that the employees can pick from, either if it's you offer an on-site or you offer it as a financial benefit, that it does benefit the employee because I'm more productive. I'm going to, if I don't have to worry about my child being well cared for while I'm at work, I can concentrate on my job. I'm going to be present more. I don't have to be, out as much. And so I think that we're working locally with the business community, with the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce. They've been at the table for recent conversations. And so that really helping that community understand how high quality early childhood helps them. And I think that if we have the conversations around the benefits, taxpayers, less, that benefit about, or that conversation about every dollar invested brings a $7 to $16 return to a community, that they understand. And so we're having those kind of conversations and hopefully turning that conversation around.
Yeah, that's what was so impressive to me in your presentation. being able to lay out numbers. Yeah, financial impact. Yeah, thank you. That was wonderful.
Yeah, I do think you're going to improve our advocacy. This presentation, I think, will get shared. And then as you are able to provide that PowerPoint that you put together, we will be sending that out to other groups of people who would like to advocate and stand up for children.
Okay.
I was going to ask Barbara Tolles if she would jump in again. Many of you know that she also works with SDC, and that ending poverty is one of the passions that Barbara has had, and fair, equitable treatment for people who are working. I know that that's been a passion, but Barbara, can you tie in some of what Ann was sharing with Milwaukee? I know you have a very big view of what is happening in terms of poverty. And let's just call it out racism too, that Wisconsin is one of the worst states for a Black person to live. And Milwaukee is one of the hardest cities to raise Black children. And you look at that and you think, this is a no-brainer. As Peggy was saying, everybody will benefit if we could, really focus on this. And so Barbara, you have more current information, but do you want to comment on poverty and families in Milwaukee?
Well, you know what? I want to comment on, well, first of all, like I said, Ann, that was a wonderful presentation. It was succinct. It hit the nail on the head. In terms of investing, we talk about here in Wisconsin, if we would just invest in early child care. Now, like we invest in our prison system. See,
there you go.
That's the reason they don't do that, because this prison system is big business. It's a huge employer. When I was in office, I went to Basketball prison. I went there we had a tour of that facility. That was my last time. When I left there, I said, this is my last time touring any kind of jail facility, because it just looked like a warehouse of Black men to me. And it saddened me. It hurt me. That bothers me. I mean, I couldn't shake that for a while. But I say that to say this. What I learned while I was there in that community, people graduate from high school with the aspiration to go work in the prison, because that's their biggest employer. And that's their biggest employer. And those are in an area like that, and they pay well. So that in that community, being a corrections officer is a good paying career, not just a job, career. So,
and Barbara, to tie what you're saying back to what Janet said, some years ago, maybe 10 years ago, there was an article that was released that said in California, they base their prison bed count on those folks that couldn't read by third grade. So on the third grade reading test, that's how they could determine how many prison cells or beds they needed. And so to tie the two things together, what Janet talked about early literacy and reading, and what you're talking about, the two are tied together. That's how California was determining how many prison beds they needed.
And Wisconsin is not far behind in that thinking. And, so if we could just change that thought, and like you said, I like the way you said that the benefits, getting organizations like MMAC, they need to understand that we wouldn't have this workforce shortage that we have today had there not been investments made some years ago. So now it's like, okay, well, there's a shortage of skilled labor, skilled workers. Where are we going to find these people? Well, if they can't read, well, you're not going to find them, or where they're going to end up. So, to me, a lot of this stuff, these issues that we're dealing with, they are so simple. They are no-brainers, but it's the powers that be. You can believe that they are the roadblock. Somebody said, what's the roadblock? They are the roadblock, because if we make these changes that are needed, it's going to interfere with their money. And that's what's happening. You know, that's the reason why Milwaukee looks like it looks, the status quo, you know. So, you know, as I think about that and us having an opportunity to, you know, to elect a new mayor, we need somebody that's going to shake this thing up and just tell the truth. Tell the truth and take some action and not be worried about whether or not the people are going to re-elect you 4 years down the road. Stop it. Somebody go in there and do something. And I want to share with you what I learned from the Republicans when I was in office. And I tell this to people. They taught me, when you have power, use it. If you only have it for a day, a week, a month, use it, because that's exactly what they do. You know, as Democrats always want to say, well, you know, can't we all get along? Can't we bring everybody in together? No, we can't bring everybody together because somebody's going to mess it up. It's when you are in power, use it. Now, I have to say, they taught me that well. So when we talk about this city, it's about, we've got to make some changes, you know, and it starts with that early childhood development. And we need to be nurturing our children, you know, because, you know, there are too many of them growing up in poverty. Too many of them. And when people that live in the suburbs feel like, okay, well, that's a Milwaukee problem or whatever. Guess what? Crime is coming out to your neighborhood too. And, or when you come to Milwaukee and people see you driving certain cars and the whole bit, and they're going to want it, you know, so they better take some ownership in this issue as well, and start working on addressing the issues of poverty and the lack of early childhood development. And our K through 12 system, we have got to improve that. You know, so, you know, I mean, MMAC, I'm glad to hear they're coming to the table finally, and they're on the late show, but better late than never.
Well said. And Janet has her hand up, and Ann, before I forget this one too, if you want to comment at all about Milwaukee Public School, because you also work there. So let's take Janet's question. Janet, you can unmute. And then Ann, any reflections you have on MPS?
Oh, one last thing I should add.
Yes.
I should say, hey, you know what? As another 53206er, what can I say?
Woo-hoo.
This is what 53206 what came out of 206. Let me put it like that. Hey.
Well said.
Getting it right, Ann.
I just want to say, you know, Milwaukee has a new mayor, and that's another place to go to. You know, he will seek out help and advice. And if you had a group of parents going there and saying, hey, we're for education, look where you are. What kind of education did you start with? And try and get him involved. It might be a good step forward.
Good observation.
That's an excellent idea, Janet, and do it before April, because he has a few months. Let him demonstrate before that primary, and then if he makes it past the primary, let him demonstrate before April what he plans to do if he wants to be elected. Let's use this power that we have as voters to get something done.
Right on, right on.
So we're nearing the end. If anyone else has a question, be sure you give me, okay, Mary Gleason.
It isn't so much a question as a comment, and I'm not an early childhood person. My sister is, my friend Pat is, but this is just a little comment. I read a phrase this week, and I came from readers. I am a reader, but the comment that I never thought of. So this was like just really, this may be very obvious to you, but it wasn't very obvious to me. The comment that reading with kids is not only important for their education and awareness of the world, but reading with kids, if you read with kids on your lap or close to them, then they will always associate reading with love and affection. That was so powerful to me, and I never thought about it that way. So it isn't only the skill, it's promoting a lifelong love of reading because you associate it with such wonderful things.
Mhm.
Good input.
Yeah, we've in some of our parenting classes, we encourage them not to use reading as a punishment. Go to your room and read,
Ooh,
because they'll connect it. Go somewhere, go sit down and do some, they'll connect it with punishment and not something that's enjoyable. So
wow.
I love what you said about sitting, cuddling, reading, because you're right. It'll be associated with something that is good, right? And feels good.
Mhm.
That's beautiful.
One thing that shocked me with my granddaughter is one time I just needed a break. And I said, Nick, she's yours. I'm going to the room. And I went to the room and I was reading a book. And both her parents read a Kindle, not a hard covered book.
Mm.
And Anya comes in and she says, Grandma, why are you reading a book? There's no kid in the bed.
Oh.
Oh dear.
Mhm.
It's like, Carol, will you please get a hardcover book so she sees that's what we read as well. So just
you-
final notes of appreciation.
Just real quickly too, you asked about any comments
Thank you.
about MPS, and
Right.
I think that MPS was so big. When I was the director of early childhood, I really tried um, to make some changes in how the early childhood community, or MPS early childhood division, connected to the community. We created learning standards for 4-year-olds that were appropriate not just for the MPS classroom, but across wherever 4-year-olds were. Um, what we've got to realize, I think, is that children up until 3rd grade are learning to read. After 3rd grade, they're reading to learn. And if they don't have that skill by 3rd grade, they will fall behind. So that's the key, from birth through age 8, they're learning to read. And after that, they're reading to learn. And so we can, just kind of remember that, and that is so key. So I think that if the district can make connections and partner with community-based early childhood programs, I think that is a key. Good to see you, Charlene. So those are my thoughts around that. That it is a continuum, that learning is on this continuum, and that it doesn't start at K-5 at kindergarten, and that it doesn't end at 12th grade, right? It starts at birth and continues. So.
And when we think of COVID and the kids who had different resources during virtual education or not, and you think about that 3rd grade level, it bothers me even more when I think about who we are not standing up for, who are the kids who have been left behind. But anyway, I'll start with my gratitude. So thank you, Ann. It was like old home week being with you. It was so wonderful.
Thank you.
And anybody else want to put in a note?
Just thank you, Ann, as well. And I hope that you send us that information because that's definitely something that the league should be promoting. So thank you for all your hard work. I have to run too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. I loved seeing you and talking to you. It's been a while.
Thank
Glad
you.
to see that you're well.
I'd like to say thank you to you all for the time together, for your ears and your hearts. Anytime I can speak about this, my career is work. So I'm happy to be here and happy to come back. Like I don't know if some of you missed it, but I've been here before speaking to you all in public. It was probably, I think it was 2006 when we were first doing the legislation for Young Star for the child care rating system. So it's good to be back. It's good to be with you all again.
Great. Next month, we also have a MAT superstar, and that's Sheila Cochran. Sheila was the director of our board for a while. She served on the MATC overall board and has really played a strong role in equity, diversity, labor. And so she's eager to come as well. And then we have Gloria Pitchford Nicholas. And I hate to refer that it's her husband who's, you know, the president of NAACP, but Gloria is a force on her own, in her own right. And so she's eager to come and talk too. And she's also interested in youth. So we'll be trying to tackle that subject a little more so we can have the greatest impact on their lives. So with that, Ann, we thank you. We'll stop recording and let's get together for lunch when it's safe.
Would love to.
All right.
Stay strong, my
Everybody-
friends.
Take care. Bye-bye. Good to see everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Barb.
again.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Pat, for the
A pleasure.
opportunity.
Oh, wonderful.